Brackeys Game Jam happened this past week. You have 1 week to make a game based on a theme announced on the first day. The theme was, "It is not real." I started brainstorming some ideas, and kept coming back to this idea of ghosts. I came up with a core gameplay loop. You play as a guy who can leave his body as a spirit, and then gain access to a spiritual bow and arrow. You can use those to fight these evil ghosts. I felt like it was a decent idea, so I went through with it. However, I was finishing up my 2D Minecraft video on the first day, and on the second day I was just relaxing, so that gave me 5 days to work on my game. First step was to make the art. I put together this character and idle animation in Sprite, as well as this running animation. I also made the art for the bow and made a little animation for drawing the bow. Now, if you don't know, the host of the Game Jam, Brackeys, is a legendary YouTube channel that was focused on making Unity tutorials. They retired from making videos last year, so in honor of that channel and the game engine they were dedicated to, I opened up Godot and started working on player movement. I then added in animations, and the movement was looking a lot cleaner. Next step was adding the bow, so I put it in and made it so that the bow would rotate towards the cursor. I also added in the bow animations, and made it so you click and hold to draw the bow, and letting go would release it. No arrows were shooting out yet, so that was my next task. I implemented the arrow projectile. You can see that if you release the arrow early, it goes slower, but if you draw the bow completely, the arrow goes way faster. Anyways, on to day 2. First task of the day was to make a dash, since, you always need a dash. That was pretty easy. The next thing I wanted to start working on was a system where you leave behind your body as a ghost. I thought using a shader to have some cool transition would look really sick. So I found this great tutorial to make a shockwave shader by Nocoloid and yoinked it into my game. I also added in this radial gradient to give the background some depth. Next, I made it so the camera follows the player and the background darkens to show that you switch into the ghost state and lightens up when you switch back. Lastly, I got started on showing you leave your body. I made it so a copy of the player sprite is left at the location when you right click and disappears when you right click again, giving the illusion that you left your body. On the start of day 3, I added some particle effects and made it so the player sprite gets brighter when you become a ghost to make it really obvious. And then I also made it so you teleport back to your body when you leave the ghost mode, like your soul is being snapped back to your physical body. It felt pretty fun teleporting back and forth. I wanted to make the physical body defenseless, so next I disabled the bow when you weren't a ghost. I needed some walls to stop the player from going out of bounds, so I used this dungeon tile set from Hex 72 and recolored it using the palette I was using. I then created a tile map in the game, and now you can see that I can't go out of bounds anymore. It was about time to juice up the arrows, so I added a particle effect as a trail behind each arrow. Next task was to make an enemy, so I put together this one with some particle effects, and added a simple AI where the enemy moves directly towards you. The arrows don't do anything quite yet though. I then added in a projectile for the enemy, along with the ability for the arrows to hit the enemy. I added a little splash effect when the arrow hits the enemy, which I achieved by making the arrow invisible, creating a new particle effect while also slowing down the arrow, which worked out pretty well. That was the end of day 3. There was still no way to kill the enemy, so I added in a health bar to the spirits, with the damage of the arrow scaling with how fast the arrow is going. I then added in a red flash to give a little bit more feedback when the enemy gets hurt. The player still has no way of getting hurt, so I added in the player health bar, and right after that, I made it so the player flashes red when damaged as well. Since the player could get hit by multiple things at once, I gave the player some invincibility frames when they're flashing red as well. Next, I added some screen shake. Obviously not this much, but just a little bit when you get hit and when your arrow hits an enemy. I then added some new enemy types, where I adjusted different values like the movement speed, health, attack cooldown, and the projectile. I needed some sort of win condition, so my next plan was to have some sort of summoning altar that you destroy to stop the evil spirits from coming over into your world. So I made this in Sprite, and then added an animation where it goes into the ground. My idea was for you to activate the altar when you walk over it, so I added that into the game. There's some particle effects, and the bar on the right side is a progress bar. I made it so that after a certain number of enemies are killed, the activated altar gets destroyed, which looks like so. I made it so that there's 5 altars to be destroyed to win the game. There is currently no system for the enemies to spawn, so I made it so that enemies start spawning randomly around you, with the harder enemies spawning after you destroy each altar. The last task for the day was giving the player some upgrades after destroying each altar. I added a speed upgrade, a dash cooldown upgrade, a bow draw speed upgrade, and an arrow piercing upgrade, which causes way too much screen shake, but honestly I was just too lazy to fix it. On the last day, I created the title screen and called the game Phantom Shot, as well as a way for the player to die and get sent back to the title screen. I created a tutorial along with some quick exposition about being told that ghosts weren't real as a child, and then started adding some sound effects. Things like making this cat meow into a ghost death sound. Here's what the game ended up playing like. Overall, while the balance of the game is a little off, and it gets a bit repetitive, I had a blast putting it together, and I felt like the game feel and juice was in a good spot. If you want to play the game, there's a link in the description. If you liked the video, I think you'll really like this one from last week about how I made a 2D version of Minecraft for a special handheld console. See you next time.